Hey guys, this is my international diesel truck, and it's a great truck. It served me well. But like every vehicle, occasionally there's a need for maintenance and repair. And usually when things break and it's time to do a repair, I'm pretty good at troubleshooting what the problem is. But in this instance, I'd like to tell you a story about a time where I was snookered by it. It wasn't what I expected it to be. And if you have a truck like this tip might be useful to you. I'll also do a shout out to Roso diesel who figured it out. So here's the story. About a year ago or so, I had a failing gas tank. Now we live up here in Northland of Minnesota, where we get a lot of snow and they put salt on the roads, and that corrodes vehicles and creates rust. And my fuel tank had gotten rusty, and it had gotten to the point where there were some little teeny pinholes where the diesel fuel would start to weep out of the tank a little bit. And I figured that situation probably wasn't going to get any better by itself, and it was time to replace the tank. I'd given some thought to epoxy painting the tank, but it seemed to me the real solution would be to replace the tank. And that's pretty expensive, so fortunately I was able to find Quality Bus Parts, which is a truck junkyard, and I was able to pick up a replacement fuel tank. And this one's an aluminum tank, so hopefully it won't have that rust issue. So I take the tank to my local mechanic and ask him to replace the fuel tank, which he did. I take the truck back, take it back home, and everything is good. They even got the fuel gauge working properly. And I found that if I would shut down the truck and then restart it in a short period of time, everything seemed fine. But if I was to shut down the truck, wait a few days, and then go and try to start it, because I don't use the truck every day, I just use it occasionally, it was a real bastard to start. Now in the past, it's always started right up, no problem at all. But after having that tank replaced, I could crank and crank and crank and the engine would not fire. So I popped open the hood and used the manual fuel prime to try to prime the fuel system. And after doing that, I could usually get the truck started. Now, hand priming the system isn't a whole heck of a lot of fun on this thing, because the prime pump is a little push button type pump, and you have to push that in with your fingertips, and it takes maybe 10 or 20 pounds of force. It's pretty stiff. And I can't reach in there with my arm in a nice way to get some leverage on it to really pump the thing. I'm more like using my fingertips. And you don't pump it once, you pump that thing up and down maybe 30 or 50 times to manually pump fuel from the tank up into the engine so that the fuel line is full of fuel and not air, which the engine's fuel pump can then move and pump and provide fuel to the engine. So I figured that when they had replaced the tank and they reconnected the fuel hoses to the tank, they just got a little tiny bit of a air gap in there where a hose wasn't making perfectly. And so it was letting a little bit of air into the system, so after the truck sat for a while, air would get into the fuel line, and the truck's engine pump, fuel pump, can't pump air. And so if you get air in the fuel line, the truck won't start because the engine can't get fuel. And so then you do the hand priming to get all the air out of the fuel system between the tank and the engine, and then the thing starts. Well, it still wouldn't start too easily, but I could usually get it started. And I also found that giving the engine a shot of starter fluid was often helpful, although I'm not super keen on using starter fluid unless it's necessary. So, brought the truck up to my local mechanic up here, had him work on a few things, and said, hey, while you're working on it, take a look at that fuel priming problem, because I got to prime the thing to get it started, and so I think there's a little air leak in the fuel line somewhere, or maybe with the fuel filters not making a really good connection at its gasket and letting a little air in. So they checked it out and told me that they couldn't really find a problem with the fuel system. They said it all looks really good. And I was pretty convinced that was the problem. And after a little while of them working on the truck, they came back and said, well, we found out what your problem was. You have a bad battery. And I was like, what? The engine spins over just fine. It seems to have plenty of battery to spin the engine over. But no, they said it was a bad battery. They tested the batteries, and this unit has 2 batteries in it, 2 big truck batteries, and they said one of them just was not in very good shape. And so they asked if I wanted to put in a new pair of batteries, and I said, sure, go for it. Why not? I mean, the batteries that are in here have been in here for a few years, so they probably do anyway. So sure, throw money at it. But they were right. Replacing the battery fixed the starting problem, even though the prior batteries seemed to have plenty of energy to crank the engine. I was surprised. So if you have a hard starting truck, like one of these Internationals, maybe your problem was the battery. That's what it was for me. I was surprised. I learned something. And maybe with this video, you did too. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate everybody who participates in the channel. And if you choose to subscribe, that'd be great. If you also choose to subscribe, I'd advise that you reach down and click that bell icon so you're notified when new content drops. Once again, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you again soon.